Wario Land 4 for the Gameboy Advance has to be one of the weirdest games that has ever been made. I mean, what even is this? Just look at it. It's some sort of sound effect test, but there's all these weird, ridiculous looking images on the side of the screen. And then there's this ridiculous sounding music track at the bottom called Tomorrow's Blood Pressure. What is that supposed to mean? I don't even know what's going on with this game. Other than that though, probably the weirdest thing in this game is the bosses. There's some strange, weird, and even straight up disgusting looking bosses in this game. Today I'm going to be ranking every single one of them based on how hard they are. Here's every boss in Wario Land 4 ranked. Number 6 is Spoiled Rotten. This boss is pretty pathetic when compared to any of the other bosses in this game. He starts out looking like a cute little piece of fruit or cute vegetable or whatever he's supposed to be, but eventually once you hit him enough times he'll eventually turn this ugly, spoiled rotten looking thing. Once that happens you just gotta hit him from behind a few times and then the fight will end. Number 5 is Aerodent or Aerodent. Not really sure which way you say it, but anyway, this guy's pretty easy. He's a rat on top of a giant bear-shaped balloon, and all you gotta do is jump on top of these parachute guys when they fall, and throw the pointy part up into the balloon, and then hit the balloon on its feet, and then it'll fall over and the rat will pop out, and then you just hit the rat as many times as you can before the balloon turns back over. Eventually, after you've hit him enough times, the rat will begin to spit fire out of the balloon. And if you don't avoid the fire, you'll begin to run off of the screen and not be able to do anything for a few seconds. Even with this boss is still not that hard, it's just time consuming. Number 4 is Cuckoo Condor. This fight starts out as a pretty easy fight with the cuckoo clock. All you have to do is avoid the little part that sticks down and then hit it. Eventually the little circular gears will begin to fall out and you'll have to avoid those as well. Eventually, after you've hit the clock enough times, what I'm assuming is the condor will pop out and then you'll begin the second phase of this boss fight. Second phase of this fight involves grabbing the eggs that fall out of the bird. You have to grab the eggs and throw it back onto its head in order to damage it. Which seems easy, but really it's not, because you have to make a perfect throw pretty much. If you don't get the eggs, they'll begin to drop on the ground and little chicks will run around, and they'll blow up in your face eventually if you don't destroy them. In the end, this boss isn't super difficult, but it's not easy either. Number 3 is Catbat. This ugly abomination is supposed to be a cross between a cat and a bat. What you have to do is jump on the waves he splashes and then knock the bat on his head. You have to avoid these little spiky eyeballs he spits out, and eventually the waves begin to bounce up and down, which makes things a little more difficult. Eventually, after you hit him enough times, the bat on his head will blow up. Eventually, towards the end of this fight, the spiky eyeballs as well as the waves begin to move a lot faster. You also have to pound on top of the Catbat's head, which is a little bit harder to do as well. I found the ending of this fight to be pretty difficult, which is a reason for its placement so high on this list. Number 2 is Cractus. I found this guy to be incredibly annoying and difficult. He'll come lunging at you from the side of the screen and you have to avoid his attacks. You have to get on these little ropes on the left side of the screen and climb up them. Then when he gets near you, you have to fall and ground pound onto his head in order to damage him. Probably the most frustrating part of this fight though is when you try to ground pound on his head and then fall below him. And his disgusting drool will make you turn this zombie-like creature. And you gotta hit this fly in order to change back. This is pretty annoying and frustrating and makes this fight more difficult than it should be. At the end of the fight, he stays near the top of the screen when he comes towards you, which makes it more difficult to do a ground pound. Overall, it's a pretty difficult fight. Number 1 is Golden Diva. Like in most games, the hardest boss in this game is the final boss. Her first form is pretty simple. All you gotta do is jump on the heads that fly towards you. then throw them up in the air to damage her fan. Her second form, though, gets a lot more difficult. She begins to throw and spit all these things out that you have to damage her with. For example, this little green guy right here. She also throws out this bear bomb, as well as some dark eggs. And probably what's the most annoying part of this fight is when she throws out this hammer. You gotta throw the hammer up into the air and let it fall back on top of you in order to turn into a spring. And then you gotta use the spring to hit her on the head. This is pretty difficult and not that easy to do. Eventually this fight becomes extremely chaotic as she begins to throw all 4 of the items she threw out before and begins to move a lot faster. This does give you a little more freedom in how to attack her, but it's still a hectic fight because of all the chaos happening on the screen. Once you've dealt with all the chaos and have finally hit her enough times, she'll then enter the second to last phase of this boss fight. And the second to last phase of this fight is probably one of the most difficult of all. She'll begin to lunge down at Wario and take out the floor, and Wario will need to do a dash attack and then do another dash attack back towards her head in order to damage her. This gets tougher to do as the fight goes on, as pieces of the floor will be missing, as well as the fact that she begins to move a lot faster. Her final form is hilariously just a pair of lips that you have to damage. And there's my ranking of every single boss in Wario Land 4. If you enjoyed this video, then consider giving it a like, and also consider subscribing, as I plan on doing more videos like this in the future.